church. Hope you have a good start to your day. Appreciate you joining us for a devotional, going through the book of Philippians. We started yesterday looking at two examples of humility. We're going to jump right back into it. We've got a lot to talk about for today, as Paul has been drawing these examples of having a submissive mind and functioning in godly humility. He talked about Jesus Christ, and Paul talked about himself a little bit as an example. Yesterday we talked about Timothy and his example of humility as it relates to caring for the needs of other people. The last one we're going to look at is a fellow by the name of Epaphroditus. And we don't know a whole lot about him, but there are some very strong statements made about him. And so we want to jump into that and see what God has for us as far as his example to us. I tell you, this is a challenging thing for me as I look at his example. It really challenges me in my own faith, my own walk with the Lord. You talk about Paul, and he was a Hebrew of Hebrews, as it says, and his own pedigree. Talk about Timothy, and Timothy was half Jew and half Gentile. We know that just from his description as Paul's writing back to him, and he had a Greek father, but he had a Jewish mother and grandmother. And but Epaphroditus is an interesting fellow because he was full Gentile as far as we can tell. He certainly has a Greek name. He was from the city of Philippi, from all accounts we can tell, and he was a member of the Philippian church. And he's there with Paul in Rome, as well as Timothy and some other ones that have joined him not to be with him in prison, but to visit him and care for him and kind of be back and forth. And Epaphroditus is one of these fellows who's going to be just a solid, concrete servant of God. His name means charming, which is an interesting name. And we don't know a whole lot about him, but we do need to know a few things just by Paul's description of him. And so we want to look at him and the testimony that he has for us today. First thing we see is that he was a balanced Christian. He was a balanced Christian. Verse 25 of chapter 2 here, it says, "Yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus." And he says several things about this guy. He says, "My brother and companion in labor and fellow soldier, but your messenger and he that ministered to my wants." Several things that are just kind of like bullets he throws out there, but really he's just kind of summarizing this fella and how he functions. And he really has a good balance to him in just the description he gives. And he says he's my brother, which would be kind of speaking to fellowship. He had a care for fellowship. This fellow Epaphroditus, he understood the importance of Christian fellowship, and he certainly fellowshiped with Paul. And he, from the beginning, we talked about fellowship in the gospel, how there's a commonality there in sharing that. But he was a companion in labor, which means that he also cared about serving, and he cared about getting the gospel out. He cared about the furtherance of the gospel and trying to get the gospel forward and getting it into people who don't know. And so he would have served alongside of Paul, and he had a care just like Paul did about getting the gospel to the lost world. And so not just fellowship and hanging out with each other, which has its place. Christian fellowship is an important aspect, and it gives us strength. It helps us to strengthen us and encourage one another in the faith. But if all we do is sit around and hold hands and just love on each other, but we don't do anything, then we're not balanced, because we need to be getting the gospel out to people. He had both. He says, my brother, companion in labor, and fellow soldier. The picture of a soldier is a picture of faithfulness. And so he's a faithful Christian man. And he just keeps plugging along. And he's going to continue to develop the description of this guy as you go through this portion of Philippians chapter 2. Epaphroditus is just a balanced Christian man, and he helps Paul in a lot of different ways. Not only that, he was a burdened Christian. He was a balanced Christian, but he was a burdened Christian. And Paul's going to talk about that a lot here. Verses 26, 27, he says, "For he longed after you all, and was full of heaviness, because that ye had heard that he had been sick." And so get the picture here. Epaphroditus had a desire to get back to Philippi, because Philippi was burdened for Epaphroditus, hearing that Epaphroditus was sick. Now that's an interesting thought. Epaphroditus is the one who's sick. Who usually wants the attention when they're sick? The sick one. Philippi was concerned for Epaphroditus, but when Epaphroditus heard that Philippi was concerned for him, he got concerned for them, that they weren't super burdened about his condition. So he wanted to get back to Philippi and let them know, hey, I'm okay now. That really is an act of selflessness. Caring for other people when you're down and you're not feeling well, and you're like, oh, I want to go the extra mile. I want to help out other people. We're thinking about the testimony of Brother Don Smith, and while he was about to step into glory, and a number of people from our church visited him and had the same testimony when they saw him. He just had the joy of the Lord on his face, and he cared about other people when they were visiting him in his time of need. And he had that same kind of testimony like Epaphroditus, caring for others, even though he's the one who really needed the attention at the time. But he had such a heart for other people that he really didn't care about his own situation as much as he did the needs of others. It really takes a Christ-like mind and heart in order to be like that, and a mind of humility. And what an example that is. Epaphroditus was that kind of guy. And it's one thing to talk about serving. It's another thing to live it out. And Epaphroditus, he was that kind of Christian man who just served. But he says, for he longed after you all, and I like this expression, and was full of heaviness. That same expression is used for Christ when he stepped into the Garden of Gethsemane. It says that he was full of heaviness. And so you see Epaphroditus having a Christ-likeness to him in his description that's given to him. And he knew the meaning of sacrifice and service, two marks of a submissive mind. He was a burdened Christian. Not only that, in verse number 30, it says, because for the work of Christ, he was nigh unto death, not regarding his own life, to supply your lack of service toward me. What an example that is. So this guy gets sick, and he cares that Philippi knows the full picture, and he doesn't want them to be overly concerned for him. But the reason he's sick, even to the point of death, it says nigh unto death. The guy almost died, but it says for the work of Christ, he was nigh unto death. He served the Lord so purposefully and intensely that we don't know what happened, but something happened that either wear his health down or jeopardize his health to the point where it hurt him physically. Whatever had happened to him, it cost him his physical health to the point where he almost died, and he did it out of his service. Boy, what a testimony that is. Because it's so easy to say, well, I don't feel good, I'm just not going to serve today. And it's one thing to be laid up in a hospital and you just physically can't move. There's nothing wrong with that. You got to heal, you got to get back. But I can speak from experience. When you're healing from surgery or something like that, you just literally physically can't get up. That's one thing. But just not feeling good and just say, yeah, I just don't feel like it today. I'm just going to mail it in. Shame on us when we get like that. Because there's so many Christians who said, yeah, it's going to cost me to serve God, but God's worth it. That was Epaphroditus. He served to the point of it almost killed him. And he was willing to do it because he loved Jesus Christ and he loved other people. And he allowed the burden that he had for others to overshadow his own physical comfort and physical health. What a strong rebuke that is to the average Christian, to myself. And we need to challenge ourselves with this and say, you know what? I need to get up. I need to just do my job. I need to push forward. I need to push through the discomfort. And I'm not saying that if you truly are sick that you should just, not take care of yourself. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But this is a challenge. This is a challenge to all of us as Christians to just not be lazy and to push ourselves when we don't feel like it, or we just want to take the easy route or just the bare minimum. Epaphroditus really is a great testimony of somebody who was willing to sacrifice his own physical well-being in order to serve the Lord and get the job done. He was a burdened Christian. He was a blessed Christian. And it says there in verses, I didn't read the rest of this, for 27, he says, for indeed he was nigh sick unto death. We talked about that. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. Paul said, man, God had mercy on him, but he also had mercy on me, because if Epaphroditus would have died, I don't know what I would have done with myself, because I love this guy so much. But verse 28, look at the blessing he is. I send him therefore the more carefully, that when ye see him again, ye may rejoice, and that I may be the less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation. And he had such a testimony. He was a blessing to other people. Kind of like how we started this study when Paul talked about, I have you in my mind, and I think about every remembrance of you, and it blesses my heart when I think back of you. Epaphroditus had that kind of testimony with the church of Philippi. He was a blessing to them. Now, we often think about the blessings of God in tangible ways, like financially, or a good job, or a nice house, and those certainly are blessings. But one of the greatest blessings of God is when God makes you a blessing to other people. Now, we don't think of it that way sometimes, especially if we're kind of selfish and we just want more stuff to put on the pile. But one of the greatest blessings in this life is when God makes you a blessing to others around you. And many that live their lives, they really don't see that as a valuable thing. But I don't want to be a burden to people. I want to be a blessing to people. I want to help people. I want my life to make an impact, to lift the burdens of others, to the point where when I'm in their presence, or when I go, not that I'm like God's gift to people. That's not what I mean by it. I mean, I truly do want my life to be a blessing to others. I want to help them to the point where I can help lift the burdens off of them, not add burdens to them. Epaphroditus was that kind of thing, a kind of Christian. And he was a man that lived to be a blessing, and that was God's blessing to him, and he loved it. He loved being that kind of Christian, and they were going to rejoice when this guy shows up. I don't know what kind of Christian you are, but Epaphroditus certainly is a screaming testimony to all of us for the kind of Christian we all need to be. A servant of God, willing to pay the price, willing to be faithful in his service, in our service, willing to go the extra mile, willing to lift the burdens off of others. And so I want to challenge you today. It challenges me when I think about this fella to consider your Christianity. Think about what kind of Christian you are, and how do you match up to the testimony of Epaphroditus? Just an everyday, ordinary Christian. He wasn't an apostle. He wasn't the Lord Jesus. He wasn't even Timothy. He wasn't a pastor of any kind that we know of. He was a regular Christian guy, but he was such a blessing to so many people. And what a challenge that is to us. I hope it challenges you. It challenges me. Hope you'll join us tomorrow for our next devotional, and may God richly bless you today.